All right, folks, here we go. Continuing with Chapter 2, and we're starting this time with Section 6 of your notes. Primetime scheduling practices. The entire process of primetime programming can be broken down into three major phases. First phase, deciding to keep or cancel already scheduled series. Secondly, developing and choosing new programs for the coming seasons. And thirdly, scheduling the entire group. So you have to decide what's going to stay on the air, what's going to go away, what's going to replace the things that you get rid of, and then figure out how to package everything together. Network seasons, the main viewing year has settled to be considered the 40 weeks between September and May. That's generally what we think of as the television season. Usually, networks will order 6 to 10 episodes of a show at a time, but with shows that do very well, you can get as many as 22 episodes per season. Contracts allow for networks to air one episode twice in a year, generally speaking. Networks strategically save their reruns for December and between February and May sweeps. So I spoke in error in the last video. The sweeps periods are November, February, May, and July. November, February, May, and July. So what we're talking about here is basically the reruns are saved for times of the year in which people are not watching television as much, or they're expecting different types of programming. People aren't at home. People are doing different things. The interests are different besides sitting and watching television. So that's generally how that works. Summer gets to air quickly canceled series, original reality series, and new show pilots. So summer really becomes a time for experimentation. It also becomes a time to get rid of inventory that you have sitting around that, well, you need something to put on the air. Let's take this off the shelf and put it on the air. Specials, sports, limited run tryouts fill out the rest of the regular season. A limited series is that in which a 4 to 6 episode tryout of a new program might occur in March or in April or during the summer, during the times where new episodes of a show generally slated to run for the season would not normally air. They do it during this time so that it gets a little bit of an audience, not necessarily the entire audience that is generally expected throughout the year, but it's a chance to measure these shows that they're trying out to see if it's worth considering them for the regular schedule. Limited series ratings for such shows can be a distorted representation of success. What do we mean by that? Shows running in popular time slots in the spring could have inflated ratings and do poorly when moved to a time slot on its own, especially if they wind up not putting it in the same time slot as when the trial originally aired. Summer shows that could show weak numbers, well, they might actually do well in the regular season. Again, keeping in mind that if these shows are being tried out during times that people in general are not watching, or if the show is not promoted that it's on for the tryout and people discover it on their own, people hear others talking about how good it is, there's that as well. Limited run series could be the wave of the future. Shows like Monk and The Sopranos. It's become more and more popular, not necessarily to order shows a full season at a time, a full 22 episodes, but perhaps run 4 episodes in this time of year, 6 episodes a little later on, 10 episodes a little later on, or any combination of those. Limited run also helps to mitigate costs of more expensive series, shows like Lost back in its day, for example, and to bridge production time between episodes of some game shows and reality shows, shows like Survivor and Amazing Race, where it's pretty much necessary to run those shows week after week after week because of the nowness and the immediacy of those kinds of shows. And to put limited run shows in between the seasons of those types of shows helps to fill in the gaps. Summer schedules. Summer became the arena for reruns of week series or episodes of quickly canceled series that were paid for but never used. You got the inventory, you've paid for it, go ahead and run it. Major networks running out of programming for the summer, though, became a goldmine for cable networks, impacting broadcast stations during July sweeps. So it was becoming popular for cable networks to start showcasing its new content during the summer. Also, by the way, we're starting to see that summer is becoming more and more of a playground for special programming that helps to attract audiences on broadcast television as well. Premiere Week is not really a thing anymore, although I did see a promo last month for the NBC Fall Preview Special, which they actually used in integration to promote its new streaming service, Peacock. But by and large, people don't get as excited about Premiere Week anymore. And a lot of factors play into that. But that notwithstanding, networks generally is what I'm trying to say. They generally premiere their new shows sometime between late August and October. New programs don't get as lost in the rush when you stagger the starts of these shows in that way. Scattering also works better around special events. NBC, whenever the Olympics come around, that would break into what would normally be the beginning of the fall season. Same with the World Series in October, that impacting Fox quite a bit. So Fox actually tends to start its fall season programming a little earlier to get a few episodes in and then takes a break for the World Series. However, scattering can also cause a show that premieres early, then is taken off the air for a special event, to lose audience to another new show. So, again, there's always a risk involved. New shows that premiere later may never be discovered by those already loyal to something else. So, you're really kind of playing many times just a crapshoot. When do you premiere a show? Do you premiere it with everything else? Do you do it earlier? Do you do it later? Do you block off certain episodes for a certain time, then bring more on later on? There's strategies involved in how you decide to do that. January and February become a second season of sorts with shows that replace canceled series. This is where we get the idea of what we call the mid-season replacements. If there's a show during the fall that didn't do as well, winds up being taken off the schedule, some of these shows that were waiting in the background may come in and take their place. And then there's that idea that perhaps there's not really such a thing as a season anymore anyway. The idea of the continuous season shows up in different ways. The idea that as network programming has become a round of constant changes, the traditional ways of premiering and preempting shows are not as closely followed anymore. And this also has to do with the way that viewers watch television nowadays, where we don't do as much appointment viewing, that we have different things that are going on in our lives that aren't necessarily regimented by what month of the year it is on the calendar, like it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. So there's not really that need to kind of keep to a calendar as to when to premiere new shows as much, at least in the eyes of the public, because promotion strategies have changed. The way that we watch television has changed. So there's opportunities to bring new content around and about just about any time. And as viewers, we've gotten used to that idea. Program renewal. What does it take for a show to come back for another season? The number of years that a program continues creating first-run episodes has largely decreased between the 1960s and the 1990s. However, as networks have become their own producers, they're reluctant to cancel any series that continues to succeed. So you do have shows that very quickly come and go, but you also have a handful of shows that stick around for years and years and years because they develop a loyal following. Some factors for shortened lifespans of programming include the high cost of workers as a show progresses. As a show gets popular, the actors demand higher pay. Also, the longer people work on a show, the more seniority they get, all that sort of thing. That takes money. Audience sophistication and shortened attention spans, depending on the audience you're reaching out for, one or the other, could impact the ratings for that show. Continued coverage of entertainment. Just as we talk about the 24-hour news cycle, there's the 24-hour entertainment cycle. Shows like Entertainment Tonight, the morning talk shows talking about what was on TV the night before, what's happening in the lives of actors and actresses, and networks, and everything else going on. People are becoming more and more informed. And as certain stories come out about certain shows or certain actors, it could impact the reputation of said show or said actor. Show burnout, also a factor. This is caused by DVD sales, rerunning, and syndication, while first-run shows continue to be produced. So there winds up at times being an oversaturation of a product, and people get bored with it or annoyed with it, and it winds up losing popularity as a result. Scarcity of outstanding, fresh, and original programming ideas. Many times it's hard to find something that is new and different. And if you're watching the same old, just packaged in a different way, it's not as appealing to make time to watch. The loss of key actors also contributes to this at times. Lots of shows are becoming more and more of the way of replacing actors or killing off characters, and it causes a bit of frustration in many viewers. Also, the cloning of primetime hits. One of the ways that we'll talk about is where you have different shows that the brand has become so popular that there's become different incarnations of that particular show. We've talked about the number of Law and Orders, the number of CSIs, the number of NCIS shows. But even without the naming idea, you've also got where the show concept is pretty much copied into a show with a completely different name as well. Some pivotal numbers, the big one being profit margin. So you figure out how much money you're making by subtracting the cost per episode from advertising revenue. If you're bringing in more than you're taking out in a particular time slot with a particular show, then you're making money. A show can be profitable for a network even if its ratings are low. How can that be? Well, just because numbers are high for a show doesn't necessarily mean the show is making money. If the show is expensive to produce and the advertising rates aren't covering the cost of purchasing that show, it becomes something that's not worthwhile for the network. So, the big question for the shows that are on the air right now, should it stay or should it go? Entertainment series in the bottom third of ratings are usually canceled. So if they're not getting the ratings that are expected, they're gone. Entertaining series in the top third of ratings are usually renewed because there's popularity, and generally with a popular show, networks can command a certain rate for the advertising. But what about those in the middle? What do we do with those that aren't super popular but also bring in an okay ratings number? Well, a lot of factors play into whether that show stays or it gets canceled. First off, weakening shows entering their 5th year will probably wind up getting canceled. Shows just beginning to slide in the ratings, well, there may be a decision that's made there. Keep the show, but maybe move it to a different time slot. Things to consider. Highly rated shows that draw in the wrong demographics. Your ratings numbers might be high, but it might be in the wrong demo. It might not be the demo that advertisers are wanting to buy. Therefore, even though the show's popular, it's not making money. A show has low ratings, but high numbers in the desired demographic. It's appealing to a niche audience that advertisers are willing to pay for. That show will most likely stay. A show has low ratings but high profit margins. Again, advertisers are willing to buy, and or the show is so cheap to produce that the network is happy with the profit margin. One other consideration, a show has strong critical approval, but it has marginal ratings. This can be for a number of different reasons. Perhaps the content is very compelling. Perhaps it appeals to a certain type of cultural standard in one way or another. But there's other ways that the network could make money in that time slot. Does it stick with the quality content, or does it dump it and try for something else? Replacement shows rarely do significantly better than shows that had been canceled, so there's that to weigh as well. If you cancel a show and you replace it with something else, well, the network has already bought that show. They're contracted with that show for its number of plays. It has that inventory, and if it shelves it and picks up something else, it's spending more money to put content on the air, and it's a gamble that they have to take should they decide to cancel a show. Will the new show help them in increasing their viewership, increasing their bottom line? Many times, marginally so. Is it worth the risk? Networks have to weigh that option. Program costs. Shows that cost more to produce have a higher chance of being canceled. So, again, it eats into the profit margin. If the network's not making money with it, or it doesn't think it's making enough money with it, it's possible that it could get tossed out. License fees, even though they are largely transferred within the company, since it owns both the network and the production company, is used as a measurement for the show's overall profitability for the network. So it is considering all expenses, even if the expenses are internal. A show's potential for profits in syndication also affects how high license fees can go. So in this case, if the show is showing that there's going to be a certain amount of popularity for it, a certain amount of demand for it before the show goes on the air, it could cost a good bit of money, even more than usual, for the network to license that show, even without any sort of proof of evidence. The networks are taking a risk when they purchase shows for air, even from themselves, because They have to run basically on some of the testing that's been done, some of the preliminary numbers and estimates, without it actually having been proven on the air. So at this point, we're going to take another break, and to finish up Chapter 2, look for the video that has Part D in the title.